So it's a real challenge to be very focused on what we mean by eco-districts, what we expect the outcomes to be. And that sometimes leaves some folks, out of the, who have a different sort of perspective or relationship with sustainability, feeling like their needs aren't getting met. But we feel it's pretty critical to be as focused as we can on what the outcomes are. And the outcomes for eco-districts are primarily around delivering environmental services to these neighborhoods so that we can reduce our overall ecological footprint, and at the same time providing more opportunities for people in those neighborhoods to benefit from those investments. But we aren't a social justice strategy. We're not primarily an environmental strategy. We're trying to blend disparate pieces into a strategy that's practical, will enhance the business opportunities and ultimately lead to more deal making and business opportunities at the district level. So it's been a challenge, and it's a great challenge, but it's one that if we don't create clarity of purpose and then deliver a pilot strategy, I think we'll get rightly criticized for trying to be too much to too many people. So, and I think that's a metaphor for all of the work that PoSI is going to do. Because our name is the Portland Sustainability Institute, you sort of assume we've got a staff of 50 people working on everything from food security to energy security to transportation, and we don't. We've got 3 targeted programs, we've got 3 full-time staff. We've got to be really cogent in how we deliver our services, and we have to make sure that people understand exactly what we're doing and what we don't do. Well, I believe in positive change can only come from attacking issues full on, with great enthusiasm and great belief that we can overcome many of the issues that seem insolvable. And I don't spend a lot of energy paying attention to sort of the daily sort of political dimensions of Congress, for instance, or the White House. I really think that I'd prefer that we focus on tangible solutions that can inspire. And so my belief is, the more interesting projects that we can put together, complex, sometimes more simple, and that we can deliver on, the more that Portland as a whole can provide a path forward for other communities. And in the meantime, create more livable, a more livable future for us. So I'm absolutely committed to Portland. I'm committed to the work, having sort of an intimacy with the work, and having a scale that I can understand personally. That's very important. I worked for the Clinton Foundation for 1.5 years, and the work was really interesting and really path-breaking, but I couldn't touch it as, I was sort of jetting around the country working with a small handful of cities, and it was very difficult for me to feel like I was making a real impact on the work. I feel best personally about my work, and always have, when I get to dive into the work, stay with it for years, just be a constant, provide a constant, energy to the work, and understanding that things take time. Change takes a great deal of work, and my biggest worry with our society right now is that we're so in love and needing of sort of instant stimulation and sort of feedback that we forget that this is long work. Well, my vision of Portland, is similar to, I think, thousands and tens of thousands of Portlanders, which is a really robust, livable, just community in which the measure of success for being a Portlander is measured by our quality of life and not by any sort of personal gains economically. And I think that, the culture of Portland, that's already part of the culture of Portland. I mean, that's what brought me here in the first place, is that it's a community-driven culture of inclusion and participation, and that the rewards that we get, have to do with things as sort of abstract as, the term livability or quality of life, and tangible as having a place, a daycare down the road, or a great restaurant that the owners down the street, or a bike path that gets you safely to work, where you can exercise and commute at the same time. all the sort of intangibles of Portland, both sort of culturally and physically, that's the vision that I like to see extended and improved upon over time. I think resiliency is so important for us to start thinking about, and frankly, I don't think we have been thinking about resiliency in any sort of profound way in much of the work we've done. I think there's some of it embedded into some of the decisions we're making as a community around infrastructure. For instance, rail, streetcar, bike systems, bus infrastructure, because those are investments to create more resiliency as oil prices increase, as energy volatility increases, etc. And we saw that last year. It was really interesting when the economy tanked initially. There was resiliency in the transportation system, so people who were tending to spend more on their transportation had options to reduce their costs. And I think, we're just getting into other areas of resiliency around food security, watershed security. These are areas that are profound, because ultimately, at the end of the day, what humans need is food, shelter, and water, and food. And there's some things I think we're doing quite well here in Portland as far as thinking through investments to make ourselves more resilient, but there's a lot that we have not. We've got, we're at risk in our water security in a big way. I think we're at risk with our food security. There's been some great, I think, anecdotal evidence that that we're improving in some of those areas. Food, for instance, there's been such a uptick in the sort of local food movement. There's been, from what I understand, in contrast to the national trends, we have more farmers who are getting into farming at a younger age. Right now, the average age of farmers are, I believe, in their late 50s in this country, and that's a trend that's quite different here in the Willamette Valley. So I think there's some really great work and enthusiasm and investment happening around resilient communities. But there's a tremendous, that's the area I think that is probably most important. In fact, I think sustainability will ultimately sort of be, become to be known as resiliency. I think that's the sort of probably the most important characteristic of communities, because we can't control everything, but we can certainly work to create redundancy in our systems to make sure that we can adapt to climate change, that we're thinking about investments, not after a flood has ravaged a community or a drought has impacted our food security, but incremental investment over time, like we do with our utilities and as we build out our communities. That has to be on the table. Leadership comes in many forms, and again, I think Portland is a place of distributed and of distributed leadership. I mean, I got my start as a young person, given the keys to develop a green building program for Portland. There are other young people and older people who have been inspired to impact their community in the Portland region and have done so through all kinds of efforts. And I think that's really powerful. I think that's kind of the secret to Portland's success ultimately over time, is that there's a sense that you can contribute. We obviously need political leadership. We need leadership in the business community. I think that's probably been the area that has I've seen the most change in the last few years, is that the business community is really starting to step up, and it's no longer this sort of conversation about environmental being sort of a nice to have, but that there's real concern that if we don't get this issue of resiliency sort of sorted out, that we're at a competitive disadvantage, and that the business community will suffer mightily for it. So there's a much more sort of robust conversation between policymakers and the business community that I hadn't seen even 5 years ago. So leadership comes in many forms. I think whether you're a CEO or a line worker, or whether you're the mayor or a staff person like I was in the city, we all need to feel like we've got a stake in making those changes.